Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth.
Well, we're back, and boy, are we glad to be back. I have missed doing these recordings and sending them out while I have been dealing with COVID and pneumonia, but I have reached the point now where I think I'm ready to begin again. I know that, and maybe it's, judgment for boasting. I know that in a number of our appeal segments in the past, one of the things that I tended to boast about was our dependability, that you could always count on us being there. And then bang, without so much as a warning, we had to stop recording and stop sending out our podcast. Well, we're humbled and grateful, as I say, to be back. I've missed you all. I want to mention to you that we're making some changes as we do come back, and let me explain those for you very briefly. First of all, we're no longer going to be recording a separate podcast called Ask RC. What's that, you say? Well, for quite some time now, we've been putting out 2 podcasts a day. This podcast, Jesus Changes Everything, went out via YouTube and assorted other regular, normal podcast distribution channels, whereas Ask RC was posted only on YouTube. That involves some sort of strategic reason that is beyond me at this moment. By the way, brain fog is one of the ongoing symptoms of COVID-19, so you may have to wade through some pea soup as you listen to me, but I'm going to hope that that's not the case too much. Anyway, we're going to fold the Ask RC podcast into the Jesus Changes Everything podcast. It will be a feature, if not weekly, close to it, I imagine. Maybe we'll start off with a commitment to being weekly. Now, why would we have to make a commitment to that? Because of the second change. The second change is simply this. We're going to go from an average or a typical day that has 3 segments to having only 2 segments. So each day's Jesus Changes Everything podcast will be generally expected to be under 15 minutes. So if you're one of those folks who listens in during your commute to or from work, and you find yourself having to make a choice, do I sit here in the parking lot and finish this, or do I go in and miss the ending? Well, now you won't have to do that. So we're going to reduce the size. I have actually heard that really from early on, it's too much. There's just too much. It's water from a fire hose. And so finally, that concern has been heard. And so, as I say, we'll be going down to 2 segments each episode, and probably be under 15 minutes each and every time. That's my expectation, my hope, and my goal. Now, I'm going to give you some honest reasons for that. When we've done appeals in the past, we've talked about, hey, this is something we're trying to grow. We're wanting to reach more and more people. We're asking for people who are being blessed by this podcast to come alongside us. And we even talked about, I don't know how much longer we can do this. Well, this reduction is in part driven by my need to get another job. I'm looking, I am applying, I am in need of work. So let me just put that in your on your plate. If you are aware of opportunities that could use the skill set that I have, I would love to hear from you and about those opportunities. If you could pray for opportunities, and I'm looking not just in the world of Big Eva or in the world of parachurch ministry or even church ministry. I'm looking at secular work as well, and I'm making applications with some of the larger companies here in Fort Wayne. So I would very much appreciate your prayers for me to be able to find a job that can appropriately and fittingly support my family. Now, that decision came about while we were dealing with COVID, when we essentially realized, this is not the work that we're doing, whether it's Sovereign Grace Fellowship Church, whether it's the podcast, whether it's all that we do for Dunamis Fellowship. None of this is combined able to support our family. And we are in a bad way financially. And in a conversation that my precious wife had with one of her dear friends, her dear friend in turn offered to start a GoFundMe to help us with unexpected medical bills related to our COVID struggle, as well as just bills coming due, car repairs that we have put off because of the slow income that I was bringing in. That GoFundMe is still out there and viewable. I would love it if you would do two things for me. One, that you would consider going there to make a donation, although of course you can always donate through our donate button, and those donations are tax deductible, and they come to us through a 501c3, and so you can do that, and that's right there at our donate button at rcsproulJR.com, or you can go to GoFundMe. It's GoFundMe.com, helping the Sproul family. And I'm asking you if you would be willing to not only give, but if you'd be willing to share on your own social media that GoFundMe request. We would be profoundly encouraged. We're very grateful for those of you who have already given and shared, and we're just asking for more of you to do the same. I don't know, does my voice sound different? I feel different. Let me just say this also about COVID. It has some long-lasting what's the word for it? Symptoms, the brain fog that I mentioned, but also a real malaise, a swiftness to grow weary. So I'm asking that you would pray for strength for us as well. Well, this is our very first welcome back. So glad to be here segment, and we will continue by God's grace to put this out 5 days a week. We started again last week putting up written posts on the blog at rcsproulJR.com. So stick with us, and we will stick with you. Thank you so much. We come now in our ongoing series, The Bible in 5 Minutes, to the book of Philemon. It is, to me, a fascinating book, and as I was thinking through what I wanted to say, I thought, it's very much like the New Testament book the Old Testament book, of Ruth. What we have in the book of Philemon is a very personal letter. Now, I know that Paul wrote to Timothy and to Titus, but those letters were written to give instruction about what to do in the broader church. Just as we have gone through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all very big picture stuff, Joshua, Judges, all of a sudden, after reading about God's people as a whole for book after book, we're drawn into one particular story. And after reading about the church as a whole, this church, that church where Timothy's leading, all of a sudden we're peering into a particular relationship, the relationship between Philemon and Onesimus. One of the other things I love about this book is the balanced wisdom of Paul in handling this situation. The situation is this, that Philemon is a believer, that his salvation came through the ministry of Paul. Philemon lived in Colossae, and he was a slave owner. Interesting how gently Paul deals with Philemon compared to how our current politically correct worldview looks at those in the past who owned slaves. But Paul is very gentle with Philemon, but in accord with the biblical notion that slavery is not a good thing, Paul instructs, encourages Philemon to welcome Onesimus back. I think I left out the fact Onesimus is a slave. He runs away from Philemon, ends up in Rome, and ends up in contact with Paul. Whether that's by design or not, we don't really know. But he and Paul strike up a relationship, and Onesimus serves Paul and the church and the kingdom well. But he not only, by the way, ran away, he took some of Philemon's money with him. So off he goes, carrying this letter from Paul to the master that he stole from and escaped from. But what's in that letter, again, is Paul's gentle instructions, saying to Philemon, it's going to be better for you, one, if you welcome back Onesimus as a brother and not as a slave. And two, anything that he may owe you, just chalk it up to my account. I just love Paul's assurance of that, and his confidence that Philemon's not going to say, now wait a minute, you're mixing apples and oranges here. Yes, you preached the gospel and my soul was saved, but this guy Onesimus has hurt my bottom line. I need to be repaid. Now Paul's like, no, what you owe me, because I brought the gospel to you, is infinitely more valuable than what Onesimus owes you. It's a beautiful thing. It is a wonderful picture of how sort of the mustard seed conspiracy works. That is, Paul does not take up a political position. He doesn't demand immediate, full-scale change, but he is confident that the power and the impact of the gospel will have, in the short term, local and immediate impact, and in the long term, worldwide impact. And that is certainly the case. It's often the case that people look back at Christianity and judge it for its permission of, and in many ways approval of, slavery. And the truth of the matter is, it's in Christian countries, and I use that word loosely, countries profoundly influenced by the Christian faith, where slavery has been outlawed at this point for centuries. Not early enough, that's fine, but for centuries. And it was the Christian faith that motivated that reality. Friends, we need to have that Pauline perspective that says, there are things that are not right. There are things that need to be changed. But we need to change them, not a heavy-handed top-down way, but by appealing to people, by appealing to believers that they would live in light of the freedom they have been given. Again, I'm not taking a side on any of this political battle over critical race theory and, again, whether or not Jonathan Edwards or George Whitefield should be canceled because they own slaves. I guess I am taking a side. No, they shouldn't. Should they have owned slaves? No, they shouldn't have. Could they have known that? Probably. Is it crazy that they didn't? No, it's not. Friends, all of us need to be slower to judge. All of us need to have that spirit of Paul and the spirit he calls Philemon to, and the spirit he calls Onesimus to. You want to know how to handle these things? Philemon is a great place to stop and study.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.